readers, I'm Amy and I'm your nonfiction feminist, here with yet another book tag, as always, because I cannot seem to get enough of these things. Today we are doing the nonfiction on BookTube tag. This was done by a book olive, and so when you search a nonfiction BookTube tag, you will now have so many more people to explore on BookTube, because nonfiction, as we all know, does not get enough attention on BookTube, and it's also really hard to search. I've watched so many videos where people are like, oh, nonfiction books, book reviewers aren't that hard to find. You just have to find people who do review them and then, like, look at who they follow, and just, there's tips like that, but that's not really helpful for those of us who don't have that kind of time, or just have really, really bad luck searching anything on Google. So this is going to make things so much easier. Now you'll be able to type nonfiction booktube into the YouTube search bar and find a ton of people who do read nonfiction. So it's gonna just be so much easier to search, and I am very grateful to a book olive for creating this tag. So let's get on with things. First question, how much nonfiction do you read? Looking at my shelves and thinking about what I've read in the last year or two, I would say that nonfiction comprises about a third of my reading. I'm not reading as much nonfiction as I would like to, but I am reading way more nonfiction than I ever have before. I've told this story several times before on my channel. I will tell it again. In high school, most of my nonfiction reading, which was maybe one book a year, were books on Cleopatra, and once there was a book on Lucille Ball, which I did love. When you get to college, you have to do a lot of research, especially in your last couple of years, if you want to graduate and stuff. So at one point I'm thinking, I have to do all this research for my major. I might as well, like with my research classes, some of them actually let us study whatever we wanted to, some did not, but with the ones that we wanted to, it's like I need something that I'm going to be really passionate about if I want to make this interesting. And at the time, and still, that was sex education. So I started looking up a bunch of articles, you know how you do on the college searches where you can actually look up the different research and stuff. Cannot read those for free now, but anyways, I'm rambling. I would look up sex education and sex research, and I came across a couple of articles. That is also how I found my Bodies in Doubt book, which I think is on my hallway shelf. And that one is on intersex. That is how I came across Mary Roach in college. My first Mary Roach book that I read was Bonk, which is about the science of sex and coupling, and that was when I really started to find my place in nonfiction and really started to appreciate it, not only for the information that it could give, but started to appreciate that not all nonfiction was dry and boring. And now, hey, it takes up a third of my reading in a year, which is really awesome, and I think I've accomplished a lot. What kind of nonfiction videos do you make or do you want to make on BookTube? I've done a couple of videos. I have one on reviewing memoirs, because most people refuse to give a star rating to memoirs or don't give as thorough of a review as I would like of memoirs, and my big point with that video, which I will link in the cards, is that when you review a memoir, you aren't necessarily reviewing their experience. You're not invalidating their experience. What you're doing is reviewing the writing style, the structure of the story that they're telling. Did they include a overall lesson or overall theme in their memoir? Was it organized chronologically? Was it organized by topic? These are the kind of things that you are reviewing. In no way are you invalidating their experience. And that's something that I find really frustrating whenever I watch a memoir review. Another one that I did was how to get into nonfiction, which I will discuss a little more at the end of this tag. And I've done like one nonfiction review. I would like to have more nonfiction content on my channel, and I do have a couple of ideas, or one idea for a video that I really want to do, but it's a long ways away because I have a lot of work to do for that one. I would like to do more nonfiction content. I'm not sure what that would look like at this point in time. Next, what is your favorite subgenre of nonfiction? Definitely memoirs. I do find memoirs to be the most, I guess, consistent would be the right word here. A lot of nonfiction is very dry and difficult to get through, and a lot of nonfiction is not dry or difficult to get through. But memoirs, for me, seem to be the most consistently readable. And I also just like that memoirs really bring out more of the personality of the person who is writing them. They are more personal, and that, again, makes them easier to get into. Another big nonfiction section for me is science, which is not something that I ever in high school would have thought that I could ever be interested in. But I have a few psychology books and some food science books. I have all of Mary Roach's books that she's done so far, except I don't have a physical copy of Stiff, but I have that on my Kindle. But I'll probably get a physical copy eventually because physical books, they're just so pretty and so nice. Do you have a favorite nonfiction book? Yes. I've mentioned this book several times throughout the year. I will mention it several more times throughout the year, but my favorite nonfiction is Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed. 16 writers on the decision not to have kids. This is edited by Megan Daum. It has 16 writers in it. It flows very, very well. The writing in here is extremely well done. It is very readable, and it's written on a topic that I feel does not get enough discussion. Like, now that I'm 26, even when I wasn't 26, now that I'm married, and even when I wasn't married, all of these questions. When are you having kids? How many kids are you gonna have? Like, when are you gonna start building your family? And it's like, I'm not. And there's nothing that anyone will ever say to convince me otherwise, because you can't convince me otherwise. Big word there, convince. You shouldn't have to convince me to have children. I have an infinite number of reasons that I don't want to have kids, and all of those reasons, every single one, is a very, very valid reason. My husband has an infinite number of reasons for not wanting to have kids, and every single one of those reasons is a very, very valid reason. Neither of us will be changing our minds. We've had 26 years to think about it. You think we're going to change our minds in another 26 years? No. Don't tell me that I'm too young to make this decision. If I'm too young to think about not having kids, then by the same thinking, aren't I too young to think about having kids? Like, that argument goes nowhere. Just, if someone says they don't want to have kids, don't pressure them otherwise. It's not going to get you anywhere, and it's just going to lose you a friendship. Like, just I need to move on. I've got a soapbox. I've got a rant. I could talk about this topic forever. As you can tell, I am very, very, very frustrated by this topic. Anyways, what do you think keeps people from wanting to read more nonfiction? I've already kind of discussed this. I think a lot of it has to do with nonfiction having this reputation of being a very dry genre. Like, when you think nonfiction, a lot of people think dry and boring and heavy on the theory and research and not so heavy on the personality, and that is a wrong idea of nonfiction. There are so many interesting nonfiction books out there, and that is why we have BookTube and nonfiction BookTube and people who are interested in nonfiction, because they are there to point you in the direction of the good nonfiction, of the interesting nonfiction. Again, the writing's going to be very personal, similar with fiction, but I've also read some fiction books that are extremely dry and boring, but fiction isn't defined by the extremely dry and boring, and nonfiction shouldn't be defined by the dry and boring either. Again, that's what we're here for, to point you in the direction of some really interesting books, whether they be fiction or nonfiction. Why do you like nonfiction? That's a very broad question. I have no idea how to answer it. Again, I really came into nonfiction in college when I started looking into topics that I was really interested in. So I'm very passionate about sex education. I'm always wanting to learn more about how to have better conversations on it. I always want to be updated on the different ways that people are teaching it. Lately, kind of because of Mary Roach and her book Stiff, I've gotten really into Caitlin Doughty, who is one of the leaders in the death positive movement. I really like her writing and her videos on death and how to talk about it and how different cultures handle it. I was always that odd kid who really loved school, not so much the math part of it, but I enjoyed school. I enjoyed going to school. That's where my friends were. That's where the books were. That's where I learned things. And I still love learning things. And nonfiction is a great way to learn about the world around us. I majored in psychology. I work at a treatment center now. So I like reading psychology books and finding out some of the different psychological theories. There's the book, The Psychopath Test, that I read that talks about how we diagnose each other with things, whether they be medical or psychological. There was The Science of Evil, which talks about how empathy plays a role in psychology, specifically in more of a, like a narcissism sense. And there was also talking about like how bipolar and empathy play together. Just, this stuff is really, really interesting. Also, food. I found several books on food that I really like, specifically Omnivore's Dilemma, which is also on my shelf, that talks about different ways that food gets from wherever it starts, whether that be on the farm or in the wild, to your plate. And that's a really interesting exploration to read about. I just love learning more, and nonfiction is a big part of that. What is a nonfiction book you read because of BookTube? A Book Olive recommended this, so thank you. I love it. What is the best nonfiction book you have read lately? So this one I read back in January. Hold on a second. So in thinking of nonfiction books that I've read lately, I'm going to say within the last 2 to 3 months. And I haven't read much nonfiction then that I've been super excited about, but I am currently reading Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. I'm only about a quarter of the way through this book, but I'm really enjoying it. I have high expectations for how it's going to continue and how it's going to end. So this is a little bit of a cheat since I haven't finished the book yet. But I'm really loving it, and it's very different from any nonfiction that I've read before. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Three Women here. I'll talk about it a lot more in my wrap up for this month, and probably in some other videos that I'm doing this month as well. What are some of your nonfiction reading goals? I don't know that I really have any right now. Again, a third of my reading right now is nonfiction. I guess ideally I would like to read more, and I think I would really like to broaden it to nonfiction from around the world. I think most of the nonfiction that I've read has been American, but that kind of goes for my reading in general. I would always like to broaden my reading out to other countries and translated books, which in general is one of my goals next year. So yeah, that's one of my general reading goals that can also be extended to nonfiction. What's your advice for incorporating more nonfiction into your reading diet? This one I'm really not going to talk much about because a link in the cards to a video I have done previously on how to incorporate more nonfiction into your reading diet. Like, that's really what the video was. Basically, look for recommendations on BookTube. Look up tags like this if you want to find more books that you might be interested in. Big one is look for a topic that you are interested in. That's huge. And there are some authors who do both fiction and nonfiction. So if you have a bunch of fiction authors that you really love reading, maybe look at more of their work and see if they've read some nonfiction, or even if they've done like the little recommendation thing on a book cover. If they recommend a certain nonfiction book, then like go for that, you know? But yeah, check out my video on that, because I'm still really, really proud of that one. That is it for this tag. I am going to tag 2 people for this because I do know that they read several books of nonfiction throughout the year, and that is Nicole from A Beautiful Chaos of Books and Hillary from Melted Books. Nicole, from what I can see, does more like medical and kind of sciencey psychology nonfiction, and Hillary really has a passion for self-help books, which is not something you see a lot of. So I hope that those 2 will do this tag and help spread the nonfiction love. Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media, ring that notification bell down below. I post every Sunday, Wednesday, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, friends.